On this Holocaust Memorial Day, as we reflect on some of the most appalling events in our history, we should keep in mind what the Holocaust can teach us about the world today. The Holocaust reminds us how important it is to stand against all types of modern-day discrimination, exploitation, and persecution. The global pandemic, affecting so many parts of our society in such different ways, has highlighted the inequalities between different groups across the world. Inequalities that we, as a society, still have much work to resolve. Here in Hampshire, we continue to tackle inequality and discrimination through our work to support all Hampshire's communities. I'm extremely proud of this authority's work over the years to tackle hate crime, and through our education services to promote inclusion and foster respect and understanding between different faiths and cultures. I have no doubt that Hampshire is a better place because of its diversity. The importance of Holocaust Memorial Day is to not only remember the victims and the brave men and women who stood together against such persecutions, but from our reflections to also become more resolute in striving for tolerance and understanding in our communities today.
Hello, I'm Danny Hable. I was born in Winchester and I've lived here all my life. I'd like to thank Councillor Mann at Hampshire County Council for acknowledging Holocaust Memorial Day and asking me to speak to you. Holocaust Memorial Day is an important event in the calendar. It's not just a Jewish thing. It's to remember the evil that has been done in the name of nationalism and so-called progress across the world, and it's still going on today. After the Holocaust, Jewish people said, "Never again." This was meant to signal an end to genocide, but there's been little progress. Today there are no fewer than 18 genocide alerts on genocidewatch.com. It's our responsibility, yours and mine, to learn to look out for the signs and stop it before it's too late. There are 10 stages of genocide, starting with classification, us and them. Then we symbolise them, the foreigner, the Jew, the Roma, the Tutsi, their dress and their colour. It all seems such a long way away, but it isn't. Our memories in this country have been dimmed over time. We need to be reminded, and we need to learn our responsibilities. I'd like to tell you about my Auntie Clara, since it was 80 years ago this year that she was murdered. My dad didn't talk much about his youth, but one thing he did repeat many times was how he missed his beautiful little sister. He arrived here from Berlin in 1939 on an agricultural scholarship and spent the war feeding England. He was working on farms around Hampshire. He was lucky. He escaped. The last time he saw Clara was when she was 16. This is a photograph of her. This is the one memorial that we have. Dad had to leave her on her own in Berlin. His brother had left years earlier. His father had been deported, and his mother and little brother followed the father. Clara worked in a Siemens factory as a slave labourer until in late November 1941 she received a letter telling her to pack one suitcase, a maximum of 20 kilos, with her most valuable things. She was being resettled in the East. She and 1,000 other Berlin Jews had to report to the railway station early on Thursday the 27th of November 1941. They had no idea what to expect. It was a crime for ordinary Germans, to speak to a Jew. Jews were isolated in the third biggest city in Europe, and they heard no news. This was the first trainload of people to leave Berlin. It reached Riga in Latvia on the evening of Saturday the 29th of November. The Nazis intended to make Latvia Judenrein, Jew-free. But at this stage, the Riga ghetto was full. They could not allow the German Jews off the train. There was nowhere for them to go. We stayed overnight, and it left Riga station very early on Sunday morning, the 30th of November, 1941. 10 kilometres down the line, it stopped at the Rumbula forest. A few days earlier, Russian prisoners of war had just finished digging 3 huge trenches, 100 metres from the railway line. The 1,000 people were ordered off the train, forced to undress, leaving their clothes in a pile and their shoes separate. It was -7 on the Baltic coast that day. They had to walk into the trenches where they were shot. At 9 o'clock, they had all been shot. Clara was 19. 2 weeks later, there were 24,000 bodies piled on top of her. I would have loved to have seen my Auntie Clara. 6 million is a difficult number to comprehend, but Clara was one person, and she was very special. The message is important. To me, it comes through my Auntie Clara. I never got the chance to see her. For all of us, we must be aware of the Rohingyas, the Uyghurs, the Yemenis, the Christians, Kurds and Druze in Syria, the genocide that's happening in Sudan and Ethiopia, and these are just a few. There are others. I said at the beginning, Holocaust Memorial Day is not just a Jewish thing. The reason for commemorating it is to learn from history and to stop these horrors now.
Hello, my name is Michael Zeffert, and I'm an active member of the Portsmouth and South Sea Hebrew Congregation. On the 21st of April 1933, Nazi Germany outlawed Jewish ritual slaughter known as shechita. Neither ritual slaughter nor Jews were even mentioned in the legislation, but the meaning was quite clear. All animals had to be pre-stunned or anesthetized before slaughter, and of course that was enough to prevent Jews from observing their dietary laws. This was the beginning of a whole series of laws passed by the Nazis that led inevitably to 6 million dead 12 years later. The justification for the law on banning ritual slaughter was concern for the welfare of animals. Adolf Hitler, of course, was an animal lover. If we fast forward to the 17th of December 2020, just last month, we see that the European Court of Justice has made the identical ruling with the identical justification. This was in response to an application from a Belgian court, despite the opposition of the Belgian Attorney General. We hear much today about institutional racism and anti-Semitism. Well, you can't get much more institutional than the European Court of Justice, can you? On many occasions in Britain, Jewish ritual slaughter has been examined in depth. In the 1920s, the personal physician to King George V, Lord Horder, was commissioned to write a full report, and he gave it a totally clean bill of health. And since then, many other accredited experts have done likewise, and their results appear in Hansard. For example, in 1960, Harold Burrow, Professor of Clinical Medicine at the Royal Veterinary College, London, stated the following: "Having witnessed the Jewish method of slaughter carried out on many thousands of animals, I am unable to persuade myself that there is any cruelty attached to it. As a lover of animals, an owner of cattle, and a veterinary surgeon, I would raise no objection to any animal bred, reared, or owned by me being subjected to this form of slaughter. The detractors of Jewish ritual slaughter always state that their concern is for animal welfare. They erroneously claim that ritual slaughter is barbaric and the animal bleeds to death. Nothing could be further from the truth. The trachea, esophagus, and carotid artery are severed with one cut, which takes 1 second to do, and the animal is rendered immediately unconscious. In contrast, during slaughter through the so-called humane method that goes on in British abattoirs, 3% of the animals are unsuccessfully stunned and writhe in agony until the slaughterer puts them out of their misery. Many thousands of cattle die this way each month in Britain, and there are plenty of reports to support that statement. If these ever so caring animal lovers in Belgium were really concerned about animal welfare, then they would be pressing the authorities to ban the force feeding of geese and ducks to produce the delicacy known as pâté de foie gras. This force feeding is acknowledged as being one of the most cruel treatments meted out to an animal. But of course, no Jews are involved, so the European Court of Justice need not hold its breath. In recent months, we've listened to lofty statements from a number of European leaders whenever an anti-Semitic outrage has been witnessed. Jewish life in Europe is to be treasured. The Jewish history in Europe is part of what we are. The contribution of Jews to European life and culture has been immeasurable, and so on and so forth. None of these leaders had a word to say when that judgment was passed last month by the European Court of Justice. Maybe they bought into the nonsense that it was all about animal welfare. In some European countries, there are attempts now to have ritual circumcision banned too. Anti-Semitic? Heaven forfend. No, just genuine humanitarian concern for Jewish baby boys. Anti-Semitism starts off innocuously enough, using popular platforms as justification. Concern for animal welfare or the protection of children. Racists and anti-Semites are both disingenuous and cunning. This way they can attract popular support from the unsuspecting public. In Europe has just been passed a law that's identical in its content and purpose to the law passed by the Nazis 87 years ago. All the lofty statements in the world condemning racism and anti-Semitism count for nothing if in the real world the law changes to prevent Jewish people freely practicing their religion and honoring their heritage. The Jewish population of continental Europe is the lowest for over 1,000 years. Despite this, anti-Semitism is rife in countries where few Jews still live. This evil thrives through basic ingrained social and religious attitudes that feed it. Of course, we're all aware of the atrocities that took place, the murder in the Jewish Museum in Brussels, for example, or the kosher hypermarket in Paris, where there was a massacre a few years ago, and the murder of the 8-year-old daughter of a rabbi in Toulouse when she was attending her school. But we move on. On the 21st of April 2019, in the small southeast Polish town of Pruchnig, population 3,500, an effigy of an ultra-Orthodox Jew was dragged through the street, adorned with the words Judas and traitor. It was then hanged after a mock trial, beaten with sticks by children and finally burnt. It is unlikely that anyone in Pruchnig had ever met a Jew. The Jewish population of Poland these days is but 10,000 out of 33 million, 0.03 of 1%. On the 27th of November 2019, a rabbi was attacked in the open street in Vienna by a knife-wielding, crazed woman screaming, "Slaughter all Jews." There were a number of bystanders, none of whom took any action. The Jewish population of Austria is no more than 7,000 out of a total of over 9 million, 0.07%. And finally, annually, in February or March, there's a carnival in the Belgian city of Aalst, just west of Brussels. They regularly produce a float depicting giant-sized Hasidic Jews sitting on sacks of money, surrounded by rats. The carnival organizers refused to accept that this is anti-Semitism at all. They insist it's just a bit of fun, quote unquote. As a result of complaints, the carnival has now lost its UNESCO recognition as a World Heritage event. The Flemish regional government refused to condemn this outrage nonetheless. Belgium's Jewish population is around 30,000 out of a total of 11.5 million, 1/4 of 1%. I believe that the continent of Europe is no longer a safe place for Jews to live as these outrages continue to take place. It saddens me to have to say this on a day we commemorate one of the most evil crimes against humanity just over 75 years ago. We need to sit up and take note. If Holocaust Memorial Day is to have any real and purposeful meaning. Thank you very much.